Today's topic is how do you communicate with the unseen therapist? Here we have this sort of invisible great communicator actually, but doesn't communicate like sitting down talking to us over breakfast. Okay? Communicates in a variety of ways, and my guest today is Dr. Marian Billich, psychologist, who has a lot of experience with this. She's going to share with us, some of her own experiences, and we'll just explore this in some detail. So, welcome, Marian.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. So, how do you communicate with the unseen therapist? How do you do it?
Well, the unseen therapist is always communicating with us. It's just being open to getting those messages.
Yeah, we're not always listening. That's the point. Our ego's going on and on with all this chat. Our ego knows what's best. And our ego doesn't want to be bothered with, some other woo-woo thing from outside.
Yes.
Okay. So, somehow I have to get these messages. So please, carry on.
Well, what happens actually is when I'm working with people with optimal EFT, and they'll work on the personal peace procedure and use the unseen therapist as a way of healing the specific events from the past. And perhaps they're using the idea of the unseen therapist to heal physical pain or an illness. But at some point, most of the people reach a realization, I could talk to the unseen therapist. I don't just have to do specific events with her. Could I talk to her? Could I have a conversation with her? And at that point, I'm usually thrilled because, yes, that's the whole point, is to be able to have this dialogue with her. And she can guide you through your life. And she's always there, always ready to help. You just have to ask, just like you have to ask her for healing from physical pain.
Well, you have to ask and listen, okay?
Yeah, that's yes. Those are two different issues, and the listening one is the more difficult.
Yeah.
And for a lot of reasons. Sometimes it's difficult to listen because you don't necessarily like what you're going to hear. Like you kind of know that I'm not going to want to hear this, or you don't. You're fearful, or you don't trust that you really could hear her voice. And how do I know? So there's lots of reasons, but since the people I'm talking about have had experiences talking to the unseen therapist about healing specific events or healing physical ailments, they already have begun to build a trust that, all right, she can help me. And there was one woman I had told you about. She had done the personal peace procedure. She had over 200 events from her life. She'd been through a lot. And she had worked on all of them and really felt a lot of peace. Now, this woman also had multiple sclerosis, MS. And as she was doing this work, the symptoms of MS had remitted. She was in remission. She didn't have any symptoms. And she was really doing well. She was feeling better. But she said she had this persistent depression throughout her life that never completely went away. And she said one day, I'm feeling better physically, but the depression is still there. Could I just talk to the unseen therapist? Could I ask her to help me or ask her why I'm depressed? And that was a huge breakthrough. I was thrilled. Inside, I was doing a dance because I was so happy she got there. and she started talking to the unseen therapist in the sessions with me and asking questions about the depression and not only specific events, but also what do I need to do to pull myself out of this? What might be different in my life? What I might be afraid of in allowing myself to be happy? And as she did this work with me, she slowly started to do the work with the unseen therapist on her own between sessions. And that was really the goal, is to have that dialogue, to have that open discussion and openness to the unseen therapist, not only when she's in my office, but during the week.
But the question that arises, Marian, how do you get these messages? I mean, does the unseen therapist write you a letter and say, "Dear Marion, here's and you read the letter? Does it come in that fashion? How does it come? How does it show up? Okay,
it shows up in many, many different ways. Too many for us to get into right now.
Well, let's try a few. Okay.
Sometimes it will come in the form of something written. It might be something you read. You're suddenly reading something, and like, for instance, I had an experience where I was very upset about something. I can't even remember what it was. It was a few weeks ago, and I couldn't find the solution to a problem. And I went to my computer, and here was a website on my computer that I don't remember pulling up, but on that website was the answer to my question. Mm-hmm. It was just there. Yeah. So it could be something like that.
Yeah, we have. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. In our advanced course, of which you're a member, we have one of our advanced lessons is lesson number 10. And it's got an actual metaphor. We call it the TV guidance channel technique to teach newcomers, to start asking questions and getting answers. Right? And it takes practice. But once you get that skill down, it's an essential skill. I want you to talk in a few minutes because you did this like for a week with unseen therapists, and you had a lot of good stuff. But we'll get to that in a moment. But we teach people how to ask, but then I'll give you my own example. When I ask, sometimes I will get an answer right then. To me, it comes in the form of it's a notion, or I'll hear some words, or I'll see a little vision of something, and it's a clue. And then I'll write it down, and I'll discuss it with the client or discuss it with myself if it's for me, and so on. But other times, and you alluded to this, I may get some answers during when I'm asking. But sometimes, apparently, I'm not ready for all the answers. An unseen therapist knows that. So later on, I'll be having a conversation, maybe with you, and you will say something, and some phrase you say like stands out in all capital letters. Or I see something on television, and somebody says, there's my answer. Oh, yeah. And it comes in all these different ways. It's not like you're sitting across the breakfast table, as I said early in my introduction, having some conversation. So it's almost like you have to start developing your own communication channels, because she's going to communicate with you in ways that fit for you at times that fit for you, because she may have to wait for your readiness to hear it. Anyway, that's my thought.
And it may differ at different times. Sometimes you might hear words in your head. Sometimes it might be an image that pops in your head, or a song. And sometimes, yes, you're not quite ready. One time I remember asking the unseen therapist about a problem I was having. And I asked her, what do I need to work on? And she showed me a picture of myself at 3 different ages. They were all through childhood, but 3 different ages. And I had not a clue what that meant. I didn't know what it meant. So I asked her, and she said, you're not ready for the answer. So think about those 3 ages and what was going on, and keep working on it, and you will be ready. So that's what I did. And it took about a week of thinking about what those ages meant and what was happening. And then it started to dawn on me. It had to do with feelings that I had to please people at certain ages. But I wasn't ready for the answer when she first gave it to me. So she gave it to me as very clearly to her, but I had to do some digging and some work in order to figure out what it meant.
It's almost like sometimes you need to do that, and she'll give you a partial clue.
Yeah.
Because you need to somehow or other get your own aha out of it.
Yes.
So I talked a minute ago, Marion, about your week-long episode.
Yes.
Talk about that, could you?
Well, to me, being able to communicate with the unseen therapist and to be connected to her is an ongoing goal for me. It's very important in my life. And I tried to connect to her as much as possible for guidance, for a feeling of peace. And one week, this was a couple of years ago when I was pretty much starting out in one of my practice groups, I had this experience of feeling connected to the unseen therapist all the time, all day. I just felt her presence. I felt connected. I got information from her. Any aches and pains that I'd been having were gone. I wasn't disturbed by things. And just as many disturbing things happened that week as happens any other week, but nothing bothered me. And I went through this week. It was wonderful. And then it disappeared and I couldn't get back there again. And I still haven't gotten back there. But knowing that I had that is important to me, to know that I can experience that. That is a possibility. So,
yeah, I've dealt with many people. I've had conversations with many people who have had spiritual experiences like I've had. My brief wow that's written in my book. And by the way, anybody who hasn't read my book, there's a link to it at the bottom, below this video and in the essential links area. But I've had lots of conversations with them, and I remember there was, in fact, one of the recordings that's even in that book is a lady that had a similar experience to what you just talked about, but for 2 weeks, and then it left again. And it came back another time. Her name was Sally, and then left again, and so on. And we don't really know why it comes and then goes. I don't really know why I had my extraordinary spiritual experience that was very brief, minutes. I don't know why I didn't stay there. I can only assume that there's something about it that is just too ominous. I'm not ready to be there permanently. And so, I got this glimpse, but now we're back here running around inside this illusion of a separated body. We want to get back to the oneness, but anyway, we don't have that answer. I can only think we're not ready for it yet permanently. Okay. But if we can all get there, by the way, that will solve every problem this world has.
Yeah.
All the political problems, all the war problems, everything, every problem. Let me mention something else. A lot of newcomers to this, and in fact, some people that are more than newcomers, been around it a while, still want to be able to communicate with the unseen therapist and don't realize they've already done it. Okay. But let me tell you what I mean by that. Okay. We have in my book, even though it's an intro book, at the end of it, something called the personal peace procedure. It's a process where you develop a specific event of your own, something that from your past that still gets you a little charge on it, As you remember, maybe you're an 8 or something like that. Then you bring an unseen therapist and you see what happens to the 8. Well, even as beginners, although you may not get success on every one you do, you'll get some successes on some. You'll go from 8 to a 5 or 8 to a 2 or 8 to a 0 or something like that. Okay. You don't realize that what you just did was communicate with the unseen therapist. Think about it for a minute. You're not using English or verbal words, okay? But you're basically with this process saying, look, I've got this intensity on this past specific event, and I'm guilty or angry or fearful or whatever about it to an 8. Please help me out. That's basically what you're doing, to simplify it. Afterwards, you look at it, and now it's a 2 or a 0 or something. Unseen therapist heard your request and answered it. Okay. And that's actually pretty dramatic when you think about it, but it's not the kind of conversation you think you would have if you were communicating. All right.
Yes.
So I presume you've seen the evidence of that over and over again, Marianne.
Oh, yeah. I'm thinking of one woman I worked with. The first time we worked with the unseen therapist, she was at a 10 on her issue, whatever it was, I don't remember. And we did the work with the unseen therapist, and I I asked that healing love come through her body and calm her body down. And anyway, when we finished, the woman said, it didn't work. Nothing happened. So I said, okay, well, let's look at the issue you brought up and how do you feel about it? Oh, that's gone. that's not there anymore. But nothing happened. So she didn't realize that she was better. It was no longer a 10, it was a 0.
Thank you for that. They say nothing happened. Well, a lot happened, but what they're thinking, and this is one of my communication problems in trying to teach all of this, because even though I say otherwise in my book and the instructions and everything else, that you don't need to have this Hollywood moment happen. You don't have to have this warm feeling and all the fuzzies and everything else in order for it to work. It worked beautifully from 10 to 0 in your example. But it was something like if you swallow an aspirin, you don't get a Hollywood moment, but if your headache goes away, it goes away. Okay? You got a result. And in this case, you got a dramatic result, but nothing happened. Well, a lot did. Okay. So communicating with the unseen therapist is among other things, we need to pay attention to what's happening and realize we are communicating even though it doesn't seem that way.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Marion, do you have anything else you want to mention before we go?
Just briefly, one of the things you said reminded me that when I'm working with children and we bring in the unseen therapist, they don't have all of the beliefs and all of the stuff that we've gone through that would get in the way of allowing communication with the unseen therapist or healing from the unseen therapist. So I might be working with a child and we'll go in with the unseen therapist, and 10 seconds later she'll say, okay, I'm done, it's gone. And even when I do testing to see is it still there, and then the next session I'll ask, it's gone. It's just so quick with a child. So it makes you wonder what it is that slows that process down for us, either the communication or the healing.
Well, a child hasn't had their imagination thwarted like growing up tends to do with our imaginations. They believe in angels and fairies and things like that, and they're fun things. And so you can bring in an angel instead of unseen therapist, which might be, too.
Oh yeah, I always change the name. I use it with my granddaughter who's a dancer. It's the magic dancer.
The magic dancer. Yeah. Okay.
So
yeah.
I always use a word that's meaningful to them. Yeah. But it's just amazing how quickly they can communicate, how they get answers, how they get healing. It makes you think about, could I be more like that?
We need to revert ourselves back, I think, in a lot of different ways. Mm-hmm. Okay, Marion, with big gratitude, thank you for your wisdom. I want to remind everybody, if you want more about all of this, look at the essential links, down below this video, and we'll see you next time.